is the consumer is willing to buy and able to buy, then only it will be fructified in our discussion. So for demand to be effective, the consumer must also be willing to make a purchase. That is the idea. So there are many products that one could afford. As I gave you, as the earlier slide, it was there. There are many products that one could afford. That means one has the ability to buy them, but for which one may not be willing to spend his or her income. Like I have money, but I am not willing to spend that on beach, a beach house in Goa, or I don't want to buy a resort in Missouri like that. So here I have money, I have the money, but I'm not interested in buying those things. Then this type of situation is also, this type of situation will also be there. That means the budget will be there, but the willingness is not there. So each of us has a unique perspective on our own personal satisfaction and the things that may enhance that satisfaction. So the important point is that if you do not expect the consumption of something to bring you added satisfaction, you will not be willing to purchase that good or service. Therefore, you do not have a demand for such things despite the fact that you might be able to afford them. So when we discuss demand, we are always referring to purchases made during a given period of time. So first was I must be able and I must be willing. Both these things should be together, and the purchase should be purchase should be defined during a given period of time. It may be one day, it may be 1 week, it may be 1 year, depending upon what type of goods you are buying. Like suppose if you are willing and able to buy 4 soft drinks at a price of 5 rupees each, your demand is 4 soft drinks a week. But your demand for shoes may be better described on a yearly basis, so that at an average price of 800 rupees a pair, you might buy 3 pairs of shoes per year. So here the example is that it may be per week, it may be per day also. It may be per day also, like food and vegetable items, your grocery, etc. It may be per day also. It may be per week, it may be per year. So the important point here is that when we refer to a person's demand for a product, we usually mean the demand over some appropriate time period, not necessarily over the rest of the person's life. Some appropriate, that is appropriate depending upon the good, depending upon the person who is buying, depending upon the person's willingness, etc. etc. So many other factors are there, but we should be confining ourselves for explaining the effective demand is that one must be able to pay, one must be willing to pay over a time period. So no matter what we purchase, we decide to buy something because it would please us. We are not forced to make purchases. We do so because we expect them to increase our personal satisfaction. So why the goods are demanded? Because the goods are going to increase our personal satisfaction. It differs from person to person, but ultimately it adds to our satisfaction. We buy good because we feel good. In that way, you can say certain goods are necessary, certain goods are comforts, and certain goods are luxuries. But still, all of these goods are giving us satisfaction, some sort of satisfaction. Now, if these things give us satisfaction, we say in economic term that they have a value to us. That means if something is satisfying our desire, then that thing has some amount of value for us. Now, value means here in this example, like goods we discussed earlier, that value means here it implies value in use. Like I bought, if you I buy shoes, then shoes have use for me. If I buy soft drinks, it has use for me, like that. So let us take another example of air. Air has a value in use because we all benefit from breathing. Air gives us satisfaction. You can also say air is essential for us, but air is free. So if air has value to us, why is it free? We certainly would be willing to pay, but here we are not able to pay because air is free. So we would be willing to pay for air rather than do without it. But air is available in such abundance that we treat it as a free good, that is known as a free good. Now let us take an example of petrol. Petrol also, while buying, we get satisfaction from using petrol. But petrol has value in use. That is, in quantity of petrol, 1 liter of petrol, 2 liters of petrol, it has value in use. But unlike air, we are paying for it. We must pay for the petrol we use. Air is a natural commodity. Petrol is also a natural commodity. Refined natural oil, refined your oil product, all natural gas product, whatever. So now petrol has value in use, and also we are paying for it. So unlike air, we must pay for the petrol we use. That is, petrol has now two values. In addition to value in use, it has value in exchange. So petrol has value in exchange as well as value in use. We are willing to exchange something, usually money, for the use of some petrol. Now the exchange method, that mode of exchange is money. So we are willing to exchange something, usually money, in return of petrol, that is for the use of some petrol. Now, why air is free but petrol is costly? One important reason is that petrol is scarce, and whereas air is abundant. We discussed all these scarcity thing in the first block. So this should start making us think about the role that scarcity plays in the economy. Just because something is scarce does not necessarily mean it will have value in exchange. So things are scarce for that reason. Like petrol and air, we said air is abundant, petrol is scarce. That is why petrol is costly. But things are scarce does not mean that it will have always value in exchange. Similarly, something may not have value in exchange because it has no value in use. So people just do not get any satisfaction from possessing or using it. So we all have a limited amount of money, that is the constant or budget constant, which we can exchange for goods and services. We all, even the richest among us, all of us have a limited amount of money. Like 1000 rupees is the limited amount of money for you, 10,000 rupees is the limited amount of money for me, and maybe 1 crore of rupees is the limited amount for daily purchase for the Ambanis. You can say like that. Whoever it is, the money is actually limited amount of money. So we have to spend it judiciously while buying things which will bring us satisfaction. As a result, we all make decisions about how we will spend, other or other than the spending, how we can save, or we can borrow money, we can go for the credit, or we can go for installment, like that. So many areas are so many ways of explaining the decisions. So explain the decisions is that we all make decisions about how we are going to spend, how we are going to save, or how we are going to borrow. This implies that how we choose to allocate our money is an important factor in determining the demand for various goods and services in the economy. So choosing the allocation of our money is also equally important. So what we discussed, person must be willing to buy, person must be able to buy things that are, those are scarce things, they are having a price. Those things which are free, they do not have a price. So things must have value in use and value in exchange. And budget constant is such that we should choose to allocate our money. So that is important. So that is important in determining the demand for various goods and services, because that is giving us satisfaction. Now in this particular today's unit, we are going to discuss what is the demand function, what is the law of demand, what is the market demand curve, what do we mean by the determinants of demand. They are the product's price, income, tastes and preferences, other prices, other determinants. We will discuss this one by one. Now let us come to the demand function. Now the demand function sets out the variables which are believed to have an influence on the demand for a particular product. The demand for different products may be determined by a range of factors which are not always the same for each of them. So so on the basis of these two sentences, we can say that the demand function can be any can be of any shape, and we can, depending upon the set of variables, it can take any shape, or it depends on range of factors. But we are going to focus on a generic demand function or the ordinary demand function, where it is a straight line downward sloping. We are not going to discuss the other convex to the origin or L-shaped, and those demand curves we are not going to discuss here. We can discuss a generic demand function, particularly demand, then complements and substitutes. We can go for these type of demand functions in managerial economics, because these are the things, these are the demand functions which are required in managerial economics. So for any individual product, the we can discuss the generic demand function, which includes some of the most common variables that affect demand. So for any individual product, some of these factors, some of these rules may not apply. Any attempt by the firm to predict demand for a product on the basis of the demand function is also important, because consumers demand function or the aggregate demand function is going to determine what should be produced, how much should be produced. These factors will be dependent on the demand functions. That is why the farm will be attempting to predict the demand for a particular product, the product the farm is going to produce. So he will be attempting what will be the supply of product, that will depend upon the base demand function. So for that, the farms require some initial knowledge, or at least the farms should be informed, or they must have some guesswork knowledge, or they must have some informed guesswork about the likely influences on it. So farms should be aware about what is going to be the demand for a particular product, how it is going to influence their production or their supply level. So for that reason, a preliminary knowledge of demand and how they are functioning and how they are behaving depending upon types of goods being present in the market. So these things are of interest for to the managerial economist. Now, the demand function can be written as QD, that is capital Q, which is the function of P0, PO, PC, PS, YD, TA, CR, RE, NO. Now PO stands for own price, that is the own price of the product. PC stands for price of the complements. PS stands for price of the substitutes. YD stands for disposable income. T stands for taste. A stands for advertisement. CRR, etc. These two stand for credit. Then ENO, we will discuss it later on. O is for other factors, other determinants. N is for the number of employees. And these things we are going to discuss one by one. Now, let us come to PO, PC, PS. These three variables are actually prices. Prices of own good, prices of related goods. That is price of own good, price of complementary goods, price of substitute goods. Complementary and substitutes are related goods of a particular good. So that is why these three prices are of immense importance to the manager. In the case of the own price of a good, the expected relationship would be, you all know this, the higher the price, the lower the quantity demanded. There is a mistake here. The higher the price, the lower would be the quantity demanded, and lower the price, the higher would be the quantity demanded. This is known as the law of demand. So the law of demand states that there is an inverse relationship between price of a commodity and quantity demanded of that commodity. Inverse relationship means if price is high, quantity demanded will be low, and if price is low, quantity demanded will be high. If price is increasing, quantity demanded will fall, like that. So that is the basic law of demand. Now, in case of complements, if two goods are complements like car and petrol, and buying car means increasing demand for car means increasing demand for petrol. Those are complementary goods. Since again substitute goods, you can say best example is tea and coffee. And in managerial economics also you can give other examples which are involved in your production of the goods. Okay, so there if we are buying a demand for one product, if the price is high for that product, then people are going to demand the substitute product. They are going to substitute that product with the cheaper product, like that. So in the case of complements, if the price of complementary good increases, we would expect demand to fall both for it and for the good that it is complementary to. Suppose there is a good A and there is a good B which is complementary to A. Now price of A is increasing. If price of A is increasing, quantity demanded of A is falling. If quantity demanded of A is falling, since B's purchase is dependent on A's purchase, quantity demanded of B will fall. Like suppose price of car is increasing, so the demand for car is falling, and petrol is a complementary good for car, so demand for petrol will also fall. Both are moving in the same direction. Now, in contrast, as opposite direction of price, but price is suppose increasing, both the goods will be falling. Complementary good as well as the good in question, would be discussed here. Now, in contrast, if the price of the substitute good rises, then the demand for the good that is a substitute for this would be expected to rise as people switch to buying the latter rather than its more expensive substitute. Like tea and coffee example, if price of tea is increasing, then tea is becoming more expensive. So quantity demanded or demand for tea will fall. People will buy less quantity of tea. Now people will buy more quantity of coffee. Here there is opposite relation. That is, if price is increasing and one good is falling, quantity demanded of that good is falling, then the quantity demanded of its substitute will increase. They will move in the opposite direction. These are the basic ideas about a particular good, and we are discussing about normal goods. Here we are discussing about normal goods. Normal goods, then they are complementaries and they are substitutes. You can discuss this way. Now YD. YD is the second, that is the after these first three, after these first three PO, PC, PS, we have disposable income, YD. YD is the fourth variable in the demand function. The independent variable is on the right hand side. So it stands for disposable income. That is the amount of money available to people to spend. It may be after tax, it may be after your other consumption, payment of installment, etc., etc. But that stands for amount of money which is available with the people to spend on goods and services. So naturally, if the greater is the level of disposable income, the more people can afford to buy, and hence for most products it will be higher level of quantity demanded or higher level of demand. So here in this case what will happen is that if income is increasing, your quantity demanded is also increasing. Here the demand curve actually it may shift upward, and you are going for a higher, with the same amount of, with the same price, you may go for higher amount of quantity, higher amount of that particular product, because your income has increased. So here again assumption is normal goods, because if it is a normal good and income is increasing, income of a person is increasing, then he is going to purchase more of that. But if it is an inferior good, naturally if my income is increasing, I am not going to buy inferior good. I will be going to buy something which is better than inferior good, which is a normal good. So here if income is increasing, then the quantity demanded is also increasing. If income is falling, quantity demanded is falling, and the good must be a normal good. The good quantity demanded of that particular good must be normal. So why use of disposable income rather than just income? Because it is justified on the grounds that people do not have total control over their gross incomes. People do not have any control over their gross incomes. Thus, the level of disposable income can change over time. For example, as I told earlier, changes in tax rates. The effect of changes in disposable income on the demand for individual products will, of course, be determined by the way in which it is spent. So, spending pattern also affects the effect of changes in disposable income on the demand for individual products. Now, let us come to tea. Tea is the tastes. Over a period of time, tastes may change significantly, but this may incorporate a wide range of factors. For example, in case of food, greater availability of alternatives may have a significant effect in changing the national diet, like availability of more vegetables, availability of more dairy products will change the dietary pattern or the national diet of a country. And what will happen is here that the taste is changing over the time. Nowadays, like there is a kind of discussion going on that people are switching to more of millet instead of cereals. So people are demanding more millet, or like people are demanding more electric scooters. So like that, you can say that that is in case of food, the availability of alternatives may have a significant effect in changing the national diet. Social pressures will also change or alter the tastes and demand will be changed. Change in technology may also have an impact. For example, as the demand for smart televisions increased, a demand for normal televisions fell as tastes changed and the latter were deemed to be inferior goods. Thus, there are a number of ways which tastes may change over time. So, depending on the kind of goods you are taking, you can say that your taste is changing, and if your taste is changing, demand for a particular product is also changing. It may fall, it may rise depending on the situation, and that is why what is demanded is also affected by technology and taste. Now, A stands for advertising. This is one of the major components of managerial economics because advertisement constitutes a bigger part of your product, where you are actually luring customers or you are attracting customers to buy your product. So for different types of advertisement is going to increase the quantity demand, increase the demand for your product. Now it relates to levels of advertising, representing the level of own product advertising, the advertising of substitutes, and the advertising of complements respectively. In general, the higher the level of own advertising for a good, the higher demand for that good would be expected, other things being constant. Now, likewise, the higher the level of advertising for a complementary good, the higher the demand for it and the goods which it is complementary to will be, given their symbiotic relationship. That is, as I told you earlier, if A, B are two complementary goods and the firm is has increased the advertising cost or has spent money on advertising of a particular good A, suppose A, then what will happen? The demand for A will increase and as well as the demand for B will increase. Then similarly for substitute goods, conversely, however, the higher the level of advertising of a substitute good, the lower the demand for the good for which it is an alternative and people buy more heavily promoted good. Suppose two goods are there, A and B. A is heavily promoted and B is a substitute of A. In that case, what will happen is that if you are promoting A, people will buy more of A and they will discard B. That means they will buy less of B. Here, the opposite is happening in case of substitutes. Now, the overall effect of advertising will depend on the extent to which each of these forms of advertising is used at any given point of time, as they may, at least in part, cancel each other out. Depending on advertisement, they will cancel each other out. It depends on the extent to which each of these forms of advertising is used. So they will cancel out each other. But certainly, if you are increasingly advertise your product, then the product demand for product will increase. This is something the farm will also need to know in order to determine its optimal advertising strategy, because the farm has to study whether the good is a normal good or whether good has complements or not, whether the good has substitutes or not. That on that basis it will choose its advertising strategy, and so that the goods promoted by him will be sold more in the market. Now CR and R, that is the for CR credit, and R stands for the rate of interest, that is the price of credit. These variables will be most important for purchases of consumer durable goods, for example cars. Someone's ability to buy a car will depend on his or her ability to raise money to pay for it. Even if I don't have income, if I have the opportunity of raising some amount of money from my relatives, or from taking a loan from my relatives, or from taking a loan from the bank, so that type of situation, so someone's ability to buy a car will depend on his or her ability to raise money to pay for it. This means the easier the credit is to obtain, the more likely they are to be able to make the purchase. At the same time, credit must be affordable. What is affordability? That means the rate of interest must be low. If it is very high, then people are not going to go for credit method. They will try to save money and buy it later in the later future. But in case of credit, availability of credit, you can buy it on this date, or today you can buy the product, but provided if the rate of interest should be low, or it is affordable, not exactly low, which is under the control of the consumer. So credit must be affordable, that is the rate of interest must be such that they have the money to pay. So these two variables, that is credit and credit rate of interest, they actually what do they do? These two variables have traditionally been regarded as exogenous to the farm, that is they cannot be controlled by the farm. Farm doesn't have any control over CR and R. Farm doesn't have any control over disposable income also. But here also, what you can do, sometimes car manufacturers are providing credit, like you go to buy a car, they will immediately arrange the finance. They will arrange the finance in the sense, suppose car is 2 lakhs, 3 lakhs, they will arrange suppose say 1.5 lakhs in easy installment basis. Nowadays it is so much, competition is so much that you can get credit at 0% of interest, like that. So in recent years, however, major car manufacturers have increasingly sought to bring them under their control through the provision of finance packages. Like certain car companies, they are providing you things on installment basis. You take the car and give us money on installment basis at some rate of interest, or maybe some no rate of interest, like that. The certain car companies are doing that. Otherwise, companies, the manufacturers or the farms do not have any control over credit and rate of interest, which is applicable to the consumers, because they are going to buy from the market, no? So they do not have any control. But big houses, they are actually nowadays providing finance packages to the customers. Now E, and this is another important factor in managerial economics, stands for expectations. This may include expectations about price and income changes. So, for example, if consumers expect the price of a good to rise in future, then they may well bring forward their purchases of it in order to avoid paying the higher price. So, if the people are expecting or thinking that the price is going to increase in the future, they will buy it now. So that will why they will buy it now, because in future the price might be high. Let us buy it and hold it. You can do that way. This creates an increase in demand in the short term immediately, but over the medium term, demand may fall in response to higher price charged. So in the beginning, when the price is going to be implemented, thinking that people will buy, so demand will be higher. Once the higher price is implemented, then the demand will be low. So the farm will need to adjust its production accordingly. The farm has to think about it, what to do in this type of situation. If the expectation is too high, expectation of the consumers is also too high, then if they think that regarding the price also, they think that it's going to increase, like that. That is one example. Then another example is that if they're thinking that the taxes are going to be increased taxes are expected to be levied on particular goods, like in after the budget you find that this good has become cheaper, that good has become dearer. Those are actually examples of the budget taxes um, um, taxes attached to the products. Okay, so increased taxes are expressed if they are expected to be levied on particular goods. For example, an increase in excise duties on alcohol and cigarettes, as is usually the case after the central budget. People will buy more of it and hoard it. Consumers of these products may buy more of them prior to the implementation of the duty increases, and they will hoard it maybe. Then alternatively, expectations about incomes, that is also having importance in the situation of demand, quantity demanded of a product. For example, people who expect their incomes to rise may buy more goods, whereas those who expect their incomes will fall, they will prefer to buy less. So at the level of the individual consumer, this may not be significant, but when aggregated across a country's population, it can be. So, thus, during a boom in the economy, the additional expected purchasing power of consumers will lead to increases in demand for a significant number of products. Conversely, the expectation that incomes will fall, perhaps as a result of redundancy during a recession, will reduce demand as consumers will become more cautious. Now, N, that is the number of, 1 minute, number of potential customers. Each product is likely to have a target market, the size of which will vary. The number of potential customers it may be a function of age or location, like young age, old age, and the places where you are staying. The number and types of toys sold in a particular country will be related to its demographic spread. In this case, the number of children within it and their ages. Now, O is other miscellaneous factors like seasonal changes in demand. Like in rainy season, the demand for your chhatris or umbrellas is increasing. In summer, demand for ice cream is increasing. In holidays, demand for ice cream is increasing. So in sum, you can say seasonal changes in demand they represent for a particular product at a particular time. So this is a catch-all variable which can be used to represent anything else which the decision maker believes to have an effect on the demand for a particular product. So any other miscellaneous factor. Thus, each product will have its own particular demand function depending on which of the above variables influence the demand for it. So demand function will be specific to the specific variable, specific independent variable. Now the law of demand, I have already discussed this. That is, if it says that the price is increasing, quantity demanded is falling, and vice versa. And you can say there is an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. So from effective buying point of view, we can say that consumers are willing and able to purchase more units of a good or service at lower prices than at higher prices, other things remaining equal. Now there are two influences, major influences on this. That is, one is income effect and the other one is substitution effect. These two are important in explaining the negative slope. Downward sloping means negatively sloped demand curve. We all discussed this in the first law of demand, the first block. So substitution effect, the income effect is the influence of a change in a product's price on real income or purchasing power. If price of a good is increasing, other things remaining constant, the real income is falling or the purchasing power is falling. Similarly, the price of a good is falling, then the real income of that consumer real income of a consumer is increasing or purchasing power is increasing. He can buy more. Okay, so if the price of something that we buy goes down, our income will go further, and we can purchase more goods and services with a given level of money income because our real income has increased. Now, the substitution effect is the influence of a reduction in a product's price on quantity demanded, such that the consumers are likely to substitute that good for the goods which have become relatively more expensive now. So if the price of a good is increasing, then what will happen, that as I told you earlier, the people will buy less, and that is they will try to substitute it with others then what will happen is that here the price is increasing, the goods demanded will be falling, and that is actually known as your substitution effect. Now, a demand curve is a graphic illustration of the relationship between price and the quantity purchased. In plotting it on a graph of a demand, the price is measured along the vertical axis and quantity on the horizontal axis. The demand curve shows the relationship between the own price of a good and the quantity demanded of it. Let us go to the graph. This thing, okay. Any change in own price causes a movement along the curve. Later on, we'll look at the graph. Now, the same information can be explained in mathematical term, like also be given in a table. Like table is there. I'll show it now. Show it now in a table or demand schedule. That is known as demand schedule. We can show it on a graph. Then we can show it by an equation. Like suppose I'm writing P is equal to 100 minus 0.25 Q. P is the price and Q is the quantity. So the advantage of writing this in equation form is that it is compact to work with, and modern managers in both the private and public sectors rely on such functions. These are estimated by using regression analysis with increasing frequency. Now this is the schedule. Left hand side is the schedule, demand schedule, and right hand side is the demand curve, or you can say diagram, and you can say graph. You can say anything, but diagram, because if it is you are drawing it by hand, then you have to say that is a diagram. So look at this schedule. Now price is falling 90 to 70 to 50 to 30 to 10, and quantity demand is increasing from 40 to 120 to 200 to 180, 360. And this is there is a linear relationship. That is why the demand curve is a straight line. It is falling. When the price is OP2, the quantity demanded is OQ2. And when the price is falling to OP1, the quantity demanded is increasing to OQ1. Or you can explain the other way, that is, when the price is OP1, quantity demanded is OQ1, and when price is increasing OP2, then quantity demanded is falling to OQ2. You can explain that way also. Now the market demand curve. Market demand curve is the horizontal summation of individual demand curve. The market demand curve is the total of the quantities demanded by all individual consumers in an economy or market area at each price. Economic theory supports the proposition that individual consumers will purchase more of a good at lower prices than at higher prices. If this is true of individual consumers, then it is also true of all consumers combined. So that is the summation of the individual quantity demanded of individual consumers. So a market curve is the sum of the quantities that all consumers in a particular market would be willing and able to purchase at various prices. Now this is the market demand curve. Now let's look at the figure. There is some alteration here in the book. There was a little mistake, a printing mistake perhaps. I have corrected it. Now look at this. The market demand curve in this figure below shows that the first consumer, second consumer, the of first consumer and second consumer gives you the market demand curve, that is right hand side. So at 10, first consumer was demanding 5 unit of quantity of a particular product, and second consumer was demanding 8 units of a particular product. Now 8 plus 5 is equal to 13, and this way when the price is 15, the first consumer was demanding 4 and second consumer was demanding 2, and the market demand at 15 rupees 15 is 4 plus 2 is equal to 6. So this is the market demand curve. Market demand curve is little flat. It is flatter than the individual demand curve. Another way of showing the derivation of the market demand curve is through the equations. Now consider the following 3 equations. There are consumer number 1, consumer number 2, consumer number 3. They have different demand conditions, different demand schedules, and their demand from actually different from each other. Now solving the individual demand curve for Q, first one will become Q1 will be equal to 12 minus P, second one will become Q2 is equal to 5 minus 0.5 P, and Q3 will be equal to 10 minus P. Now here market from demand, total quantity demanded in the market will be Q1 plus Q2 plus Q3, that is equal to 27 minus 2.5. We just add everything. So QM is the total quantity demanded in the market. This is the algebraic expression for the market demand curve. We could solve this expression for P to get the inverse demand function. P is equal from this, that is QM is equal to 27 minus 2.5 P. Now we can write that P is equal to 10.8 minus 0.4 QM, 0.4 QM. Now this is the schedule. Price 10,8642, quantity 1, quantity 2, quantity 3, 3 consumers are there. Then adding all those quantity demanded at different prices gives you the right and extreme right, that is the market demand, and that can be plotted on the graph, on a graph. The market demand curve shows that the quantity purchased goes up from 12 to 22 as the price falls from 6 to 2, from 6 to 2. Look at this, 6, when it was 6, market demand was 12. When it is 2, market demand was 22. This is called a change in quantity demanded. As the price falls, a greater quantity is demanded, and as the price goes up, increases, smaller quantity is demanded. So the individual demand relationship is also equally applicable to the market demand, but here the market demand curve will be little flatter. Now, a change in quantity demanded is caused by a change in the price of the product for any given demand curve. This is true of individual consumers' demand as well as for the market demand. Same theory holds good for the market demand. But what determines how much will be bought at each price? Why are more televisions bought now than 10 years ago, despite higher prices? Why are more paperback books bought today than in previous years? All these things are depending on the determinants of demand. That means, what are the determinants of demand so that we are behaving in such a way that when the price is increasing, the quantity demanded is becoming less. So the determinants of demand are actually many. The many forces influence our decisions regarding the bundle of goods and services we choose to purchase. It is important for managers to understand these forces as fully as possible in order to make and implement decisions that enhance their farm's long-term health. So for the farm's benefit, the managers should understand these forces correctly. It is probably impossible to know about all such forces, obviously, let alone be able to identify and measure them sufficiently to incorporate them into a manager's decision framework. Obviously, it is impossible, but a small subset of that can be taken care of, can be taken into account. So small subset of these forces, suppose there are many forces, from them we choose certain important forces which can be taken as the determinants of demand. These are overall level. You can say that the overall level of demand is determined by consumers' incomes, their attitudes or feelings about products, the prices of related goods, their expectations, and by the number of consumers in the market. These are often referred to as the determinants of demand, Now, determinants of demand are the factors that determine how much will be purchased at each price. Now, more or less of a product may be purchased at any price because of the changes in these factors. So, such changes are shown by a shift of the entire demand curve. These type of determinants are also known as shifters. From shift to shifters. Such changes are shown by a shift of the entire demand curve. Before we are discussing law of demand, the consumer was moving from one point to another along the demand curve. Now, because of the changes in the determinants of the demand curve will be shifting towards the right or to the left because of these determinants. So, the demand curve shifts to the right, we say that there is an increase in demand, and if set to the left, then we say decrease in demand. Remember, in law of demand, in demand curve, we say any shifting along that towards from Q1 to Q2 below, then that is the increase in quantity demanded, and is going up, then that is decrease in quantity demanded. Here it is increase in demand or decrease in demand. This is the graph. Increased demand, it is going towards the right, and in case of decreased demand, it is coming towards the left. D1 is the original demand curve. If it is moving to the right, then that is a increased demand case, and it is moving towards the left, That is, in this case, that is becoming a decreased demand case. Now, changes in demand are different from the changes in quantity demanded. As price changes, people buy more or less along a given demand curve, which I told you just now. It is not a shift in the whole demand curve. Some of the variables that cause a change in demand are changing incomes, changing taste of consumers, changing in other prices, changing in consumers' expectation, changing in the number of consumers in the market, etc. These variables are known as shifter variables. Determinants of demands, these variables, what we discussed earlier, are known as shifter variables. Now, first is product's price as a determinant of demand. If price is changing, what is happening to the demand? Consumers are expected to be willing and able to purchase more of a product. So, in evaluating demand or sales function for a firm or an entire industry, one of the first things a thoughtful analyst or manager will consider is the price of a product. If inventories have built up, inventories means unsold stock that is kept in the space. People are not buying, things are remaining unsold in your go down. So if inventories have built up, a farm may consider lowering the price, because if my products are unsold, naturally I will try to reduce my price so that there will be increase in quantity demanded. So if inventories have built up, a farm may consider lowering the price to stimulate the quantity demanded. So rebates will be given to the consumers so that you can buy more and more of that product. Rebate is a very popular way of giving incentives to the consumers so that people can buy more of your goods. Rebate programs on one type or another have appeared for cars, home appliances, toys, and even food products. You all are familiar with this. Such rebates constitute a way of lowering the effective purchase price. The purchase price means purchase price is the price that is demanded by the farm or by the producer, so or by the investor. So they decide what is the purchase price. So giving rebate means then decreasing the purchase price, that is the market price, that is the price faced by the consumers. Now, purchase price, they were increasing the quantity that consumers demand without the negative repercussions of raising the price once the excess inventory is eliminated. Those unsold stocks, once they are sold, then the producer or the farm can come back to the old price. As long as they are not sold, the producer can give a rebate, or the manager can give a rebate for those products, and those products will be sold. So instead of raising the price back to its normal level, the farm simply allows the rebate programs to quietly come to an end. So instead of reducing the price, then what the farm does, the farm stops the rebate program, because once the unsold items are sold, then there is no need of giving rebate to the consumers. This is called a change in quantity demanded. As the effective price falls, a greater quantity is demanded. Now, shifter variables, are the name applies, cause the demand curve to shift. That is, there is a change in demand. Nearly all goods and services are what economists refer to as normal goods. There are goods, these are goods for which consumption goes up and the incomes of consumers rise. Now, goods for which consumption increases as the incomes of the consumers rise, are called normal goods. Then we know about inferior goods. Then the relationship between product demand and income is one of the reasons that so much national attention is given to the level of GDP and changes in the rate of growth of GDP. So GDP is the broadest measure of income generated in the economy. In demand analysis, demand concepts and other more narrowly defined measures such as personal income or disposable personal income are often used. These are related to GDP. Part of GDP, actually, we also explain personal income, per capita income, personal per capita income, disposable income of the economy, that is part of GDP. So these measures are highly correlated with GDP. Thus, looking at the changing trends in GDP is helpful for understanding what may happen to the demand for a product. So this is the manager's work. Manager will look at the trends in GDP, whether the income is increasing or not, then the manager can take decisions. Now, tastes and preferences as determinants. Before this one was income as a determinant, another shifter variable. Now, tastes and preferences are determinants. You know that if taste is changing, preferences are changing, then the quantity demanded is changing. Like I will come straight to the point fourth. That is, for example, consider the automobile market. In the United States, people appear to have a preference for big, powerful cars throughout the 50s and 60s. During the 70s, the preference structure started to change in favor of smaller, less powerful, but more fuel efficient cars. If that is changing, naturally, the all those products, old car models, they will be obsolete and they cannot be sold in the market. So taste and preferences are also another shifter. Then convenience factors are there, such as ease of driving, parking, that is also important. Demographic changes, like to a trend towards small families, more of young people, all these are demographic changes. Then these things also change the demand, change the quantity demanded. So in change the demand, sorry, not quantity change, it will shift the demand curve. In terms of the theory, the change in preference towards fuel efficient cars will shift the demand curve for smaller cars to the right. It will be in the next slide. On the other hand, social attitudes towards smoking have changed, and thus one would expect that a demand curve for cigarettes has shifted to the left, figure B. We can go this way. That is, as much as we may like to think that we know our own minds and make our own purchase decisions without the influence of others, we are very likely influenced quite strongly also by our peer groups, that is our friends and colleagues, including the people with whom we work, classmates, roommates, people with whom we socialize, neighbors, etc. So we get influenced, and for that reason, tastes and preferences are increasing. Similarly, decisions about clothes, entertainment, they also actually are getting influenced. They are also influenced by peer groups. So from the business perspective, advertising is the key factor in the formation and alterations of consumers' taste and preferences. You can change the consumer's taste and preference by intelligent advertising, or by kind of giving some incentives or advertising your product in such a way that people are getting attracted to your product. So taste and preference can be controlled like that by advertisement. That is the from business or from business perspective. So we can think of advertising as being either primarily informational or primarily transformational. Informational advertisements are designed to increase demand for a particular product by providing information about a product, how it is used, how much it costs. Newspaper advertisements are also there. They have the strongest informational components. Then transformational advertisements are designed to influence the image of a product or service. They attempt to enhance the satisfaction we get from a product by evoking positive images of how we will feel if we buy it. Think about television or social media commercial for products. They tell you the name of the product, associate its consumption with some reference group of happy, healthy looking people, often famous people as well, and generally try to create a positive image in an attempt to alter your preference structure in favor of that product. It's like a bodybuilder will be showing you the morning drinks, which is going to give you muscles, like that. So Salman Khan is showing you muscles as well as the drink advertisement. So you get influence. That is the basic idea. But consumer is rational. We know that consumer is rational. He may not get influenced, but there is always a tussle between the consumer, how to lure them into your product. A single exposure to such an advertisement is not usually very effective, but repeated exposure to that advertisement and similar ones has been shown to influence consumers' preferences. In terms of measurement, this determinant of demand tests and preferences is the most difficult one for the analyst to handle, because it's a very psychological thing. We cannot study their tastes and preferences. It is hard to identify all the things that influence tastes and preferences, and often just as hard to measure those that are identical, because these are subjective. Measures of advertising effort are sometimes used to help account for this determinant of demand. That is your taste and preferences. Other prices as determinants is the complementary goods. Then earlier it was noted, we are giving the example, it was noted that the rise in price of gasoline during the 70s had some effect on the demand for large versus small cars in the United States. Gasoline and cars are complementary, and that is why they are used together and complement with one another. So if the price of gasoline is increasing, there are two effects on the automobile market. First is the higher price of gas, that will increase the cost of driving and reduce the total number of miles individuals tended to drive. Second is smaller, more fuel efficient cars became more attractive relative to big cars. So if the price of gasoline is increasing, there are two effects. High price will actually, you will be demanding less of big cars, and fuel efficient cars will be in demand. Now this one I was telling, substitute and complement diagrams are like this. Here example of Coke, and here the example of, I forgot that quantity of Coke, substitute, and here complement um, both the graphs. Look at the graphs, what is happening. That is, it is, they are not parallel shifting, they are shifting towards the right, and here also shifting towards the right. But complement case, the diagram is little, lower part is actually changing little, upper part is changing more compared to the lower part. And but in case of substitutes, I find that it is actually flat, being flat towards the towards the below. I mean, d dash curve is moving like this. Okay, the gap between upper person and the gap between lower person are different. Here the gap between lower person is higher than that of upper person in case of substitutes. In case of complements, the gap between the lower person is lower than the gap between the higher persons. Okay, now this relationship can be stated in a more general term. So if you observe, there are two goods complementary, and they are complementary, then if the price of B goes up, we can expect the quantity demanded for A to be reduced, and the reverse is also true. This I have already explained to you. Now substitute goods also I have explained to you. That is, we will expect the demand for coffee to rise. This is in detail, you can write down according to the law of demand, C and D, two products C and D. Now economists and other business analysts are therefore concerned with all other prices that may affect the products they are analyzing. The price of both complementary and substitute products can be expected to influence the demand. A measure known as cross price elasticity of demand will be helpful, that we will learn later. Now other determinants of demand: foremost, price, income, taste and preferences, and the price of complementary and substitute goods. These are the important variables. Now other variables we can discuss, that is population growth is one, then changing age distribution is there, then growing proportion of people over 65 is also there, demographic changes, demographic characteristic changes are also there. We can think a lot of related variables like that. So what is the summary? What is the summary of all this? The law of demand states that there is an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. It arises out of two effects: income and substitution effect. The income effect states that given a fixed budget, increase in a product's price leaves less income for other goods. The substitution effect says that consumers tends to substitute cheaper goods for more expensive goods, and the market demand curve is the horizontal summation of individual demand curve, and the total quantity demanded in any market depends upon the price of the product being sold, on the prices of all other products, on the income of the individuals buying in that market, on the distribution of income among the individuals, tastes, and a number of other influencing variables. The key terms here: law of demand, market demand, substitutes, and complements. There is one something called cross price elasticity is also there. Those elasticity part are going to be taught in your next units. So for the time being, this much is required. You must have some ideas about the law of demand. Thank you. Thank you all.